Welcome to the channel. This is going to be my review slash opinion of episode 6 of Mr. and Mrs. Smith. This is the Amazon TV series, not the movie, but it's a TV series that is streaming currently on Amazon. I would highly recommend this show. I really like it. Mainly the dynamic between the two main characters, but there's a lot of other stuff to enjoy. So this episode 6 is one of my favorite episodes. I would say it's not quite the most they're my favorite, but it's pretty close to it. And I was laughing through this. There's to me anyways, maybe my weird sense of humor. It was a very funny show, although there's no jokes, there's no real setups or anything like that. The humor comes in the fact that it's I can't subtle is maybe not the right humor, but it's um, anyways, let me explain. I'll start down with a bit of a rundown and I can explain where it is. So, how we start off is Jane and John are going to couples therapy. So, they have, they get Sarah Paulson. Again, talked about a lot of very good actors appearing in small roles or guest stars. Here it is here, episode 6. Um, and Sarah Paulson does a really good job of being like just a everything probably wrong with shrinks, talking very hippie type one. Everything's a safe space or safe word or something like that. And at one point I think John calls Jane controlling, and uh, Sarah Paulson's character is, oh, well, can you say that in a different way? So he has to come up with a way that's not critical to Jane. So it's all about feeling good and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, it's um, just for her listening to her stuff, and John and Jane are responding how they think people should respond to her when she says stuff. So they're not saying what they really feel or anything. They're just, oh, we agree kind of thing. But what I find humorous is that we, as the audience, understand what John and Jane are really talking about, whereas Sarah Paulson doesn't, because they have to their cover story is that they're software engineers, so everything that they are trying to verbalize what they're feeling and what they're going through has to be done in terms of computers. So they're talking about coding and really difficult coding mission, and Jane's always coding or telling him how to code and all this stuff. So I just found that hilarious, because we know that that's not what they're talking about. They're talking about killing people and being a spy and all this stuff. So you get this really subtle thing that they're trying to explain what the problem is, but they can't actually tell the shrink what the problem is because it's spy stuff and they can't tell her. So they have to figure out a way of trying to give her enough information that she can potentially help them. But they go in there for the first session, which is this pictured here, and they're talking about just how John feels that Jane thinks he's stupid, and she is controlling, and she always wants to run the show and stuff like that. And then they actually cut to the mission that they're sort of talking about, which is they're on the rooftop looking down into a building. There's a bunch of guys playing poker. They have binoculars. They're observing them. They don't really say what they're there to do, although we have an idea that it's not good for the guys in the room. But John says like he wants to handle it. He wants to run with it. So he goes down and joins the poker game. No explanation of how he manages to do that then when they don't know him. And he's having a good time doing it. So he doesn't appear to be in any rush to do whatever it is they have to do. And he's bonding with the people, and he says that Jane doesn't like him bonding with his coworkers and when they're coding. Again, I find it funny. And so they start talking about what men talk about when they're together doing stuff, and eventually comes around to women. And John admits that he's married to an Asian, and then they start pulling out all the stereotypes and go a little bit on the racist side. This is the other guys, but it's well within the script that that was the kind of things that maybe a bunch of guys would say at a poker game. And but they keep asking John who he is, and he always fluffs it off or just talks over it or ignores it. And they get to a certain point, right around when they're talking about Asian women, that they're sort of getting a little bit more. Well, who exactly are you? And right at that point, they all get shot by Jane. So one, she got impatient with waiting. Two, didn't like what was being said. So she's got a sniper rifle and she whacks two of the three guys in the room, forcing John to pull his gun while the other guy pulls his gun and shoot him. So again, that pisses John off, and they have more to talk to. So they go back to their for another session. You can see that their relationship is more strained each one of these meetings. But sorry, he does say at in the first meeting that or indicates that Jane did tell him that they were trying to replace him. So he brings that up as a point that they're trying to replace him on the software development team. But right at the end of the first session, Sarah Paulson gives this really weird story about facing down a monkey in some place. She's always talking about like third world places that she's been, and that sort of trying to brag about it, I guess. And at the end, you see Jane and John walking away from her house, and they both don't know what she was talking about, and they sort of discuss it. But anyways, they come back from the second session, and they're a little bit farther apart from each other on the couch, and they're a little more distance from each other, and they've had another series of spats or whatever around control and what they're doing. And at that point, you have them, and Jane brings up him needing an inhaler. So the shrink doesn't know what that's got to do with software coding. But they cut to a scene where they're chasing some suspect through a crowd in New York City, and John can't keep up because he's having an asthma attack. So Jane ends up going into the elevator with this guy who's trying to kill her, and they get into a fight and pulls the gun and shooting and stuff. And John gets there too late to get in the elevator with him, so then he starts going up the stairs, and he's like Jane's calling out the floor they're on each time, and it's like 1, 3, 5, 9. We're up at the 10th, the 11th, and poor John's trying to go up the stairs and climb them, but he's suffering an asthma attack, so he can't get there. So again, that's something that they sort of throw at each other in front of the shrink. Again, they can't say he can't get up a flight of stairs to help her kill somebody. So it's coding and he's not getting his coding done and all this stuff. So again, that's the part that I enjoyed in this episode is that they're trying to impart some information to help the shrink, but they can't actually say what they're doing. So at the very end, they get up on the roof, and Jane takes on the guy that's the target, and she grabs him and says, "Die, motherfucker, die," and throws him off the top floor. You can see that pit. You can just see her looking over in this picture, but she throws him off the roof. And John, hearing that, because they're mic'd together on their mission, just starts laughing, and he starts laughing at her. Again, he can't say why or what exactly she was doing that caused him to laugh, but him and her argue it a bit about that. Oh, he was laughing at me, and it's like, well, it was just what you said. And he gives a sort of a poor example of what he's saying, and he says, "Well, what if I said this phrase?" And Jane starts laughing. And says, see. And anyways, they get sort of, Sarah Paulson comes back with this psychobabble stuff. Well, you should try to do this and count to 10 the next time, or take a breather, or do this when things are bothering you. Well, we know that they're on missions that are life and death, and they're not going to be able to do that. Um, so again, they leave her house, and they're confused about what she's asking and stuff like that. And the final, they come back again for a third time, and they're sitting farther apart again, and they're sort of not communicating or anything like that. So then Sarah Paulson's trying to get information out of them, and they talk about going on a hunting trip. And she says, "What are you hunting?" And we know it's people, but oh, John's a big game hunter. So the part that pissed Jane off is that John was going like very male on her and trying to and teaching her stuff, and thought she didn't need to be taught. And ultimately, they fail the mission because they never do find the person they're trying to be hunting down. But they get into a session by a fire at night one time, and John, I think in one of the earlier episodes, they said he never cut contact with his mother, and Jane's constantly bringing that up, and he goes over the edge about that and throws back in her face that she never talks about her father, has never talked to her father. So, yeah, they get into another big fight. And Sarah Paulson says, well, maybe it starts going. Again, this is the funny part because we know that what they're talking about, and she doesn't. So she said, well, this isn't life or death. Well, yes, it is because they're assassins, and it wouldn't kill you to go to another job. Well, yeah, if they tried to go to another job, they probably would be killed. So it's just she comes out with all these standard things, and because we know what's going on in the background, that yeah, they can't quit the job or else they'll be killed. Yeah, they can't separate or else one or the other of them can be killed. Yes, they can't go to their boss and discuss changes because it would not be good for them. So that again is this is why I like this episode so much. And so kind of at the end of it, John says, well, maybe we can talk to our boss about running some, I can't say separate operations, but doing some separate coding projects as sort of his throwing a bone to the psychiatrist. And that gets the psychiatrist, again, comes up with some other stupid thing about being in the Peruvian jungle or something. She's constantly doing that stuff. Oh, they saw some ornaments on the shelf, and oh, that was by Taika Waititi from this country, and it was the last thing he ever did before he died, and yada yada, and very condescending white person stuff that they do. But anyways, they kind of just nod and go. But at the very end, she hands him a flash drive and says, "Oh, here's the recordings," and they're both staring at her. What recordings? And she says, well, in the document you signed before I come, I told you I'd be recording your sessions and giving them to you so you could go through them again. And they're, oh, that's nice, knowing that we know that it's not nice, and they're showing in their attitude and stuff that they don't think it's nice. But anyway, so thank you very much. Yeah, we'll see you next week. And then you see the result on the screen. Here, they're leaving her house. They're leaving very quickly because they've set her house on fire to burn it down because they don't know what she's recorded and what they've said and that stuff. So they set her house on fire. And the shrink comes out on the front lawn and is trying to get the fire department to come because she says, I have all this important stuff in here. And the two of them just are making a beeline to the car to get the hell out of there. But this is, again, uh, not gonna show the spoilers, but it's just again why I like this show so much. I like Donald Glover. Sorry, I don't remember the actress's name um, that plays Jane. I'll just look it up here in a second. Maya Erskine. So I just love the interaction between the two of them, and the dialogue is so good. I mean, when they're talking, when they get into these arguments about stuff, it's well written, it makes sense, it's realistic, stuff like that. And then this bit where they've got the shrink and they can't tell the shrink what exactly is going on, and have to try to figure out some way of giving her the information that maybe helps them without compromising their disguise. I just found it hilarious. Just a very good episode. I really, really like this episode. But the series itself, again, it's nothing like Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the movie with Brad Pitt and Angela Jolie. There's some action in it, but it's very limited. Like this episode 6, there was the poker party and Jane shooting them. Again, very small scene. The second scene where they're chasing this guy and Jane throws him off the roof. Again, very small scene. And then this final scene here where you see them in the woods, and here they're trying to hunt some guy down, and they have this confrontation around the campfire, throwing some stuff back and forth. Jane throws at John that he still is obsessed with his mother, and John says, "No, you're obsessed with my mother. I'm having to look after her because my father's dead. There's nobody else in the family. She's only got me. You don't even talk to your father, whatever," and that pisses her off. So at the very end of this campfire scene, she asks him, keeps asking him, "Who's your emergency contact? Who's your emergency contact?" And John says, "My mother." And Jane says, "Well, you're mine," because sort of to say, "I don't have anybody. You're all that I have," kind of thing. And it ends, that scene ends on kind of a sour note between them. But I still really like this episode. It is funny, again, from the perspective of we know what John and Jane are talking about, and the psychiatrist doesn't. And it is hilarious in my mind. So this is one of their better episodes. I enjoyed it. I recommend this show completely. And this is one of my favorite episodes. Very good Sarah Paulson here on the screen. Does a good job of being sort of this brain dead, woke type um, psychologist. So very good acting on her part, or part for her, and she does a very good job with it. So that's my review. Again, very good episode. Really enjoyed it. Really, I'm enjoying this series. I highly recommend it to anybody looking for something to see on Amazon. If you have access to Amazon with Amazon Prime, you're looking for something new to look. Check this series out. I think you really enjoy it. Okay, thanks.